So my needs assessment presentation is on resources for intimate partner violence. I think that this is a critical, important need that we need to recognize. I see it all the time in my community. I think that it is something that maybe is shied away from talking about just because it's an uncomfortable conversation to have, things like that. But it is definitely something that we should be recognizing more and recognizing how big of an issue it is. I mean, like I said, I see it all the time in my community, unfortunately. I work with a community where this comes up a lot, and this situation of people being in these types of intimate partner violence relationships are where they're struggling and they don't know where to go next, they don't know where to turn. So I think that this is, something that is very, very important, and macro level interventions can be implemented and should be implemented just because of the importance of this topic. So, like I said, for several reasons, and intimate partner violence can escalate very quickly and unpredictably. So, I think this arguably is one of the most important things to know. That one day somebody can be living in this kind of situation. They can be in this awful, horrible situation. But the next day it can become even worse. And maybe you wouldn't think that, maybe they wouldn't think that, but then it could. And, this could happen for so many different reasons, and you just never know. And it's a scary thing. It's a scary focus. It's something that unfortunately does happen. Even though we wish it didn't, obviously. But it's something to recognize and know, because it is just as important to know as anything else. And going off of that, it's also more than just a private issue. So whenever we think of intimate partner violence, I think we just, think of it as in the home, as between two people, between partners in a home. Maybe between married couple, boyfriend, girlfriend, anything like that. We think, between a couple partners, we think that's just in their home, and that's their problem. That's what they're dealing with. But no, it's a public safety concern as well. I mean, when these shelters provide shelter protection, legal resources, they're helping these from violence reoccurring. They're making it so that there's repeat offenses being reduced and protecting victims and children from further harm, and that is when it becomes a public safety concern. So it is important to recognize that it's not just in the home, right? It's something that goes beyond that. And when these communities and when these legal aids and trauma centers and things like that get involved, it's a public safety concern as well. So intimate partner violence, it does have many things that warrant a macro level intervention. Chronic gaps in support for survivors, this is something that should not happen. We should be trying to make these gaps smaller, reduce these gaps. We should be having consistent support for survivors, which may be a reason why they're not leaving their situation. Maybe they're too scared. They're afraid that if they leave, they'll get support for a certain amount of time, and then it will be gone. Then they can't rebuild their life. They can't do all these things. So it's important that we have that consistent, accessible, easily accessible, affordable support for these survivors, so that they know that they can where to turn to. So, like I said, survivors don't have the access to the help that they need. And when I think about underserved or rural areas, it's even more, they may not have shelters within 50 or more miles for them. They don't know where to go. They don't know where to report their abuse to. They don't know who to seek for help. They don't know where to go to. And when you're in areas like this, it's something that can be true. There might not be any help within 50 or more miles, which is why it is important that we, when working with this community and trying to make a change, this also should be a main focus, thinking about those areas that this can be happening in, and not just focusing on the big cities or the main towns or things like that. Like underserved rural areas, this can be happening as well, and we need to make sure that they are included and focus on that as well. Underfunding of shelters, legal aid, trauma services. I mean, this obviously goes along with what we were talking about. It makes it very difficult for survivors to escape and rebuild. Like I said, they may not know if they can go somewhere and feel safe, or if it's going to be for a certain amount of time or not, or if they will have the resources that they need when they leave to rebuild their life. You know, it's a very scary thing for them to leave, too. They need to know if they can be supported if they do leave. So, these are just some statistics that I found about intimate partner violence. There's so much research. There's so much data. You will never come to a standstill when finding data and research about this topic, right? There's so many things. So one thing I found was sexual violence, stalking, and intimate partner violence are public health problems that are known to have a negative impact on millions of persons in the United States each year, not only by way of immediate harm, but also through negative long-term health impacts. And I think that it's also important to recognize the long-term health impacts, because we can often forget that when somebody is going through this and when this is happening to somebody, they're going to be affected for so long, maybe for the rest of their lives. They will need resources, they will need support, whether that's counseling, just access to health care, things like that. There's going to be so many negative long-term health impacts, physical, emotional, mental, that we need to think about, and that we need to also raise awareness for when they are going through this situation. I also found this one to be very alarming. Worldwide, 30% of all women who have been in a relationship have experienced physical or sexual violence, or both, by their intimate partner. And that first sentence alone is very alarming to me. You know, it's not something that we want to be true or think about, but unfortunately it's a statistic, and it's something that is very scary, you know. This abuse has serious consequences, as the quote says, fatal outcomes, and I found the last part about 6% of all murdered men, 38% of all female murder victims. I think that for some reason it is less normalized for men to speak out about their intimate partner violence if they are experiencing it. Maybe they believe they won't be listened to or believed or trusted, but I think it is important that no matter what race, gender, age, nationality, anything, that you have the right to speak out about what you're going through, and have the right to be heard and get the resources and access to help that you need. So I found some historic interventions that I thought to be really empowering. One of them was the Battered Women's Movement. This was in the 1970s, 1980s. It did recognize domestic violence as a public issue rather than a private matter. I found this to be very good. I did hear about this movement before this, but when I found it again, it reminded me of how empowering this is, and how it was one of the earliest large-scale movements, you know. It focused on shelter creation, legal rights, survivor advocacy, gave rise to some of the first domestic violence shelters. I mean, that's huge. These domestic violence shelters are things that people count on and that they need, and for safety and things like that. And this movement was just one of the first things that brought these to light. The Violence Against Women's Act I also found to be very interesting. This was in 1994. It funded domestic violence shelters, created legal protections, addressed stalking, sexual assault, and dating violence. So I found this to be very good too, because it focuses on other things as well, stalking, sexual assault, and dating violence, not just, which can go hand in hand with intimate partner violence, but it really highlights the specific things that can occur in intimate partner violence. It shows that it just goes beyond that. It can be anything. It can be verbal, physical, sexual, anything. And it can occur also in dating violence, not just between those, you know, married couples and things like that. So I found this act to be very eye-opening as well, and very educational. And of course, we have modern interventions. I found technology-based ones to be very prevalent today, just because obviously technology is very prevalent in today's society everywhere. You know, it's technology. It's growing, it's advancing. We have crisis text hotlines, online safety planning tools, and secure communication for survivors. So these things are great. And if survivors have access to them, then it is very helpful and will be something that is very beneficial for them. They will be able to text people, call people 24/7, have them pick up, and they will need help. They'll get information, and they can do that. And with technology being so big in today's world, in today's society, it may attract more people to do that. It may be a safer option than other things. So I think that that's a very prevalent one today. Trauma-informed care and survivor-centered approaches. Survivors need safety, autonomy, and empowerment, not just protection. So I found this to be very interesting because it is true. Yes, survivors need protection, but they need empowerment. These situations are very, very, they need hope. They take away their hope. They may feel powerless. They don't have, they feel they don't have rights. They don't have anything. They need empowerment. They need to feel like themselves again. They need to feel like they can do it because they can. They need to feel like they're able to, get through what they need to get through. They need to rebuild their life, and in order to do that, they need to be empowered. If you're not empowered, then you're not going to be able to, do that. So these trauma-informed care and survivor-centered approaches do that. They help them recognize that they are empowered and that they are strong and that they have confidence to get through what they need to get through, Just as anything else, there are barriers, of course, when implementing macro-level intervention. I found a big one to be intimate partner violence is often not viewed as a public issue, as we've talked about, which can lead policymakers to not support interventions. It can also lead other issues to be prioritized, maybe there's lack of awareness, political agendas happening, and, the issue of intimate partner violence may not seem as prevalent or as important as these other issues, which is just not true. It's just as important. It's so important. We need these issues to be addressed. And if we can raise more awareness when implementing macro-level interventions, this may be helpful. Funding is a huge thing. These agencies, they don't have budgets, they don't have staff, they are struggling to retain qualified staff. Without qualified staff, you can't have an agency. Without funding, you can't have an agency. So these things are unfortunately true and need to be focused on as well. We need to be putting our funding into things such as this instead of other things. We need to be focusing on the importance of these agencies and how they will help these people leave their dangerous situations. Some concerns that I have, obviously there's a lot of concerns. It's not easy and there will be barriers. Since this is such a widespread issue, policymakers, legal professionals may not see it what it is, may not see the issue for what it is. They may think that, it's something that can be talked about or cannot be talked about, and also since maybe they think that it happens so often that they don't need to talk about it because maybe they think there's already resources out there or there's already things that people know that they can go to, but that's also not the case. Many people don't know what they have. They don't know the resources in their community. I think it's up to the community as well to make sure that people know that they have these resources if they need them. They have these places that they can go to, they can call, they can do this, whatever they need to do. I think that is very important and something that we should be focusing on as well. Raising awareness, allowing communities to see how serious of an issue this is. This will be a primary concern, as I said. Many may not understand how serious of an issue this is. I don't hear it talked about enough, I think. I don't hear it talked about nearly enough. It's something that does happen in my community every day. I was driving by a Dunkin' Donuts the other day and saw a man grabbing a woman's arm very violently in the parking lot, and I could hear him raising his voice. And I was so far away in my car. I could hear, luckily there's a police officer close by, I think, that went over and, dealt with it. But I just couldn't believe my eyes driving by in my own community and seeing that. And it was very eye-opening to me. And things like this happen all the time. So if we are able to just at least a little bit raise concern, because this is concerning. And this issue is something that needs to be addressed. So if we can raise concern, especially to people like policymakers, legal professionals, things like that, then we can hopefully continue to raise awareness so that these victims will be empowered and that they will have the opportunity to get the resources they need and to go and leave their situations if they need to. And they, it's not easy. And they won't think it's easy, and it's not. But they should have the right and equal access and opportunity to be able to escape and leave if they need to. They need to be able to have these options and know that if they do that, they will be supported and they won't just be abandoned, and that they will be able to go start a life somewhere.